Russell Lissack is the youngest guitarist in this series of my favourites. His dynamic playing has helped fuel the success of the indie rock band Bloc Party. Of the 4 London-based musicians that make up Bloc Party, Russell is the one with the long fringe and the shy presence on stage. The band has come a long way since their humble beginnings. Russell, when you started playing guitar, what were you using? And did you start with an electric or an acoustic?
I started with the electric, although I didn't have an amp to start with. I was living with my parents, so I couldn't really crank up the amp too loud anyway. I think it was only once you actually started practicing with other people, like friends in a garage, and then you could actually make some noise. That was kind of when it became an electric guitar. It was just a guitar to learn on to start with.
Like many guitarists, Russell is largely self-taught. The short period that he did have lessons nearly put him off playing completely.
I got to a point where I think I'd learned enough from teachers and I wanted to just learn stuff myself. I didn't want to get weighed down by learning the kind of way that you're meant to play guitar. I thought that might be a burden. It would stifle your creativity.
What was it that they were teaching you that made you scared that you'd get into their way?
Well, it was a lot of kind of like kind of blues things, which is fine, but when you're 16, it wasn't what I was really interested in, and learning the techniques and notes and things like that was useful, and that's something I've still remembered, but the style of music they were teaching me wasn't something I had a passion for. And I'd go to the lesson each week and I'd have a tape with me of a band or a song I liked, and I'd be like, can you teach me this? They'd show me it, but I could see that they weren't really into teaching me that, and then we'd go back to the other thing. And so once I got the skills to play myself, I kind of realised I wanted to move on from that. As you got into playing more and more, did you find yourself looking for a band? Did you form a band? Around about the same time I started learning, my best friend, he got a bass guitar, so we were kind of learning together and we were the band pretty much, just the two of us. And then another good friend who lived down the road from me, I found out he played, and he was completely self-taught as well, and we were into the same band, so we were kind of teaching each other how to play the songs of the bands we liked, and so the three of us started doing stuff together. Rather than spending long, solitary nights writing songs, making music has always been a democratic process for Russell and his band. Like many of his generation, his approach has been to shun the blokey guitar gods of the 70s for a more emotional feel in the making of their music. It's a contemporary approach, completely at odds with the old cliché of rock bands being made up of warring egos. I think it's always good to have other people's ideas as well as your own. I think that makes the song stronger, having other people's opinions that you value. If someone can suggest an idea that inspires you, if you're at a loss of what you're doing perhaps, if you're trying to write a part but you can't really get there, and then someone can suggest something that will make you approach it from a completely different angle, I find that quite helpful, because someone can tell you, no, let's scrap this bit, let's do something else, and it gets you out of that rut.
One of my favourite Bloc Party songs is Like Breaking Glass, which is the opening track on Silent Alarm, their first album. Even though I imagine it's one of their earliest songs, you get a sense of the cinematic scope of their ambition.
Music journalist Keith Cameron has followed Bloc Party since they started.
It's a strangely democratic sound, because you can tell from hearing it that the drummer is obviously a fairly flamboyant player, but even his efforts seem to be reined into the democratic sound of the whole, and it's just terribly dramatic, and the guitar playing is very, very striking in the way it stabs in and out, but nothing seems to be dominant. I think the recording is a great example of a band with very strong individual elements who succeed in almost subsuming their egos for the benefit of the collective. It's so cold in this house. Open mouth swallowing us.
Bloc Party's harsh guitar sound conjures up the spirit of punk. In fact, Bloc Party is often referred to as a post-punk band. It's a term bandied about by journalists and critics, and you may well ask, what does it mean?
And if you imagine punk's effect being a scorching of the earth, if you like, post-punk was what emerged in the wake of that, the green shoots of rebirth, I suppose. There has been a strand of British rock music in this decade which clearly expressed a desire to think a bit harder or to be seen to be a little more creative than simply strumming a guitar on stage, plugging in a guitar to an amplifier and pouring one's heart out, which I guess would be the post-Oasis trend, which went through bands like The Verve. I guess a band like Franz Ferdinand, when they came along in the early part of this decade, was carrying a standard for a little bit more of a flamboyant, ambiguous approach to making guitar rock. And it seems fairly clear to me that Bloc Party were following very much in the wake of the work that Franz Ferdinand did.
For me, the defining feature of Russell's playing is his wider and wider use of guitar effects. Whether it's dirty or clean, quiet or loud, he's able to create a vast and varied palette of sounds.
From the very beginning, that was always something I was interested in. As soon as I'd got the guitar, obviously it's quite an expensive hobby, so it was quite a gradual thing. I remember I just got a distortion to start with. I think that's probably most people's first pedal.
What's your effects board all about?
Well, it's pretty big. I've got reverb, distortion, about 4 delays, a couple of pitch shifters, wah-wah, tuner, harmonizer.
By using guitar pedals between the guitar and the amplifier, a whole range of new sounds can be achieved. These pedals transform the instrument into something completely new, not just a louder acoustic guitar. And Russell plays higher up on the neck than most guitarists, often on the 12th fret and sometimes not even on the fret. He's off the fretboard altogether. And this enables him to use his effects to the max. Dave Burlock is the Gear Reviews editor for Guitarist magazine.
Come on through, let's go and find the gear room. I've set a few things up so we can demonstrate some effects and how they came about and what they sound like. Effects gives a combination of music and sound, and used well, a very simple part can be transformed with a delay, with a vibrato or an amp tremolo. It's beyond what the music is. It's all part of the sound created. It's all part of the recipe. The ingredients go in and you end up with just a great tasting dish. Effects are like new ingredients that guitar players have to create with. A few effects come along which almost have cult status, and one of those perhaps is the Digitech whammy pedal. It's basically pitch shifting, i.e. it takes a note that you play into it and then replicates that note a certain interval higher. The interesting thing about the whammy is that via a foot pedal you can control that pitch.
On this particular song, Something's Gotta Blow, which is the live version of it, I'm using the effects pedals to create really a mood. I'd say similar to Russell, actually. It's not really creating music as such, it's just creating an atmosphere. And that's the beauty of effects, is that it can conjure up this atmosphere of whatever you want, whether it's ethereal or aggressive. In this case, Something's Gotta Blow is just conjuring up an atmosphere for the keyboard player to do his solo against. I know when I'm playing on stage, I've got quite a few effects as well, and I program everything so that although I've got lots of things to click, I don't have to think about the effects because I've done that and programmed it. But I still have to because in each song there's probably about 4 changes.
Yeah.
So I'm still having to do all of this and remember where to sing and change at the same time.
Yeah,
which is quite a thing.
Yeah, no, that must be harder having to sing as well. Unfortunately, I don't have to do that.
And what happens on stage now? Do you ever have any mishaps with your effects?
We used to all the time. I mean, I can remember when we were first starting out, it was a case of like a backpack full of pedals and connecting everything together and lots of 9-volt batteries and something going wrong and the gig falling apart. And we were still kind of having problems for a couple of years because our setups were so complicated. And it's only been in the last, I guess, year or 18 months, touch wood, I haven't had any disasters since then because everything's kind of routed together. Like we had to spend ages figuring out the routing of all these pedals. It was really kind of complicated electronics.
And you get quite strong melodies going with your effects as well, don't you?
Yeah, for me personally, that's always been the most important thing above anything else. 99% of the time I just kind of get a melody in my head and transpose it to the guitar. I've always found the melody to be so important. I think it probably stems from listening to a lot of pop in the 80s when I was growing up, but I think that was an era of such kind of strong melodic pop writing, and that's always been really important to me. I think that's the part of music that really touches people emotionally, is a strong melody.
What do you think it is about the guitar? I mean, part of it is, I think, the way you hold a guitar. What else about the guitar do you think really is so inviting? Because it is, isn't it?
It's kind of hypnotic in a way. You can just sit there and while away hours.
Do you think it's to do with posing?
Posing? Well, it probably is for some people. I mean, I guess.
But you do your fair share of posing with the guitar.
No, I'm usually hiding behind the guitar.
That's your posing, though.
Well, no, I'm sure for some people that's a different approach to life.
Despite his shy demeanour, the spontaneity of playing live is actually Russell's favourite part of the music-making process, and I can testify to that because I've seen him live and he is electric. But the way Block Party's albums are recorded is much more systematic.
We all play together, but only the drums are recorded, and then everyone does their thing afterwards. It's because of patience more than anything. To get the right sound, plus everyone playing at the same time, would take a lot longer than for, say, just me to sit there and play my part, and then I'll just let's do it with this sound. Anyone can do that at home, really, now.
I use the same approach making my own music, and it certainly makes the recording process easier. It means that the songs sound their best when I'm recording and writing. But it's still the immediate sense of communication you get when you play live that Russell and I both love.
Joan Armatrading was talking to Block Party's lead guitarist, Russell Lissack.